Hello and welcome to View and Do Video Craft Classroom number 9. I'm Jill Hodges, author of several of Plaid's books on painted wearables. In this tape I'll be showing you how fun, easy, and inexpensive it is to create bright, colorful fashions for yourself or to give as gifts. We'll be working with Fashion Show fabric soft paints and dimensional paints which make fabric painting a breeze. We'll be using patterns from two of my books, Geometric Fashions to Paint and Fashions on the Go. In addition, you'll want to use Folk Art fabric painting brushes. Now, check to make sure you have everything you need from the materials list on the back of this tape, and let's get started. Our first project is from the book Geometric Fashions to Paint. It's an outfit called Tropical Delight. I've removed the pattern from the center of the book, and you'll notice that this is a half pattern. What you need to do is take a large piece of tracing paper and trace the entire pattern onto the paper. Now I'm using a ruler so that I can make sure that my lines are nice and sharp. You want to make sure that your lines are straight. Now I'm not going to trace the entire pattern onto the garment, but you'll mark your dots and the triangles. I'll come down and show you the trees. Now, if you'll notice, I am not staying exactly in the lines, and that's okay. This is a fun, whimsical pattern, and that's exactly how you want it to appear on the garment. So don't be afraid if you get out of the lines just a little. Now down here, you might want to use a ruler again for the straight edges. Now, I'm not going to finish tracing this pattern. I've got one that I've already done, and I'll show you what it looks like. This is the pattern that has been traced completely. Now we are ready to transfer it to the garment. What I like to use is transfer paper by Plaid. Now, the transfer paper comes in a package like this, and there are 4 sheets to a package. I've taped my 4 sheets together, and what you'll want to do is tape the transfer paper to your garment first, in position, turn your pattern over, line up your pattern on the garment, make sure that it's centered both vertically and horizontally, and then tape your pattern to the garment. Now what you're going to use to transfer the pattern to the garment is an ordinary ballpoint pen. And here again you probably want to use a ruler just to make sure that those lines are straight and even. You don't need to use a lot of pressure. Just a nice, gentle, even pressure will work. If you use too much pressure, you might tear the pattern itself. What I like to do is just make a little small dot for the larger dots that will be covered by dimensional paint. Now there again with the trees, don't worry if you get out of line. Now what you'll also want to do at some point is lift up the pattern to make sure that it is transferring properly to the garment. You'll want to use a ruler down here on the straight lines again. And I would suggest using a ruler anytime there are straight lines, just to make sure that you get nice geometric shapes. And then you would come down here, trace across completely. Now I'm going to let you finish the pattern, and we'll be ready for our next step, which is painting. Now that the pattern is completely transferred to the garment, we're ready to begin painting with soft paint. All of the colors that you'll need are listed on the back of the tape, and they're also listed in the pattern book. Shake your paint and squeeze it out onto your palette. And I like to go ahead and squeeze out all of the colors at once. Just saves a little bit of time. You can see what a bright, colorful shirt this is going to be. Now we'll begin painting. And what I suggest is that you work from the top of the garment to the bottom of the garment. This is to prevent getting your sleeves in the paint, and it's also to prevent smearing any paint onto your shirt. We'll start with the top color, which is lemon yellow. And you want to stay inside the lines as much as possible. But there again, if you happen to get out of the lines, don't worry too much about it, because these will be outlined with dimensional paint, and you can always cover boo-boos with your dimensional paint. One thing I suggest when you're painting is to make sure your brushes are in good shape. If you begin to notice that your brushes are beginning to get frayed, I would suggest getting new brushes, because something that an artist needs is a good set of brushes. Now, I'm not going to continue painting all of the yellow area here, but that's what you'll want to do to complete the shirt. I'm going to go ahead and start with the hot magenta stripe and zigzag on the garment. This area here has a real free and easy hand-painted look, so I don't want you to worry too much about making sure that every bit of space inside the pattern is covered. You don't want it to have too much of a dry brushed effect, but you don't want to totally saturate the fabric with the paint either. This is a fun tropical shirt, and you want it to look that way. Now I need to go back in here and get this corner painted, and that's the reason I need a good sharp brush. There, I think that's enough of the hot magenta. We'll go back and paint the yellow triangles again. Make sure your brush is really dry when you take it out of the water once you've cleaned it. And if you need to get in tight corners, like I am with these triangles, stand your brush up on end. Rather than holding it flat against the fabric, stand it up on end like this to get into the tight corners, to get really sharp lines. We are going to be painting all of the soft paint first before we do the dimensional paint. There, you can see how easy it is to even get into the tight corners with a good brush. Now we're going to start on the trees. These are a little bit more free-flowing than the zigzags and the triangles. If you want to practice the tree first on a piece of paper or a paper towel, do that, because you need to get a real free-flowing motion when you do the trees. And there again, don't worry about not covering all of the pattern area. You want a little bit of the dry brushed effect. That just adds to the tropical nature and the hand-painted nature of the garment. I'm using the Kelly green to do the palm trees. And then I will use the gold glitter to do the tree trunk. Now go ahead and load your brush with a lot of gold glitter and just stroke it on there. Now I'm not going to finish the rest of the trees because I think you get the hang of that. It's really simple and easy to do. Now we're going to do the little squares in hot blue. You just need basically to make 2 or 3 quick strokes with a wide brush. You might need to load your brush more than once. These colors remind me of a summer day in the Caribbean. And this would be a really great outfit to take on vacation. Okay, you see how easy it is to paint a nice, even square just with a few strokes of the brush. Now, of course, you would continue painting all of the blue squares, but I'm going to move ahead to the lemon yellow stripe here. Each time you change colors, you will want to clean your brush really thoroughly so that one color doesn't bleed into another. Now you'll want to go ahead and load your brush well so that you can get good coverage on this yellow line. Make it a nice solid yellow line. If you get any ridges of paint, just pull them into the center with the edge of your brush. Now, you will want to go ahead and complete all of the soft painting on your garment. At this point, you'll let it dry 24 hours and then heat set it according to the directions on the bottle of paint. Then we'll be ready to move on to the next step, which is dimensional painting. Now that you've finished painting with the brush-on soft paint and you've heat set your garment, we're ready to begin painting with the dimensional paint. The first thing you want to do is open your bottle. You take a paper clip, wrap it in a towel, heat the tip of the paper clip for a few seconds, and pierce the tip of the bottle. You may want to wiggle it around a little. Now what this does is the heat melts the plastic so that the tip of the bottle is sealed and will not, or the tip of the bottle is opened and the plastic will not seal up again. That's very important. Before you paint, be sure and shake your paint into the tip of the bottle. Now I want to show you the size line that you get with a pierced tip. You can see that's a pretty wide line there. Now let me show you how to create with the same bottle of paint a fine line writing tip, and this is done with a piece of 3/4 inch cellophane tape. I use about 3.5 inches, and I lay the cellophane tape right in the center of the bottle tip here. Seal that edge down good. With your thumb and forefinger, just begin to wrap the tape, moving your thumb and forefinger up the bottle And it's going to begin to come back down again by itself. Now you've got a little tail here of tape that you can use to take the tape off when you're finished with the tip. See how fast and easy that is? You have created a fine line writing tip with a piece of cellophane tape. Now let me show you again the size of the line that you get with this fine line writing tip. That is pretty thin. Isn't that marvelous? And see how easy that was? Now for my painting purposes, I don't want a line quite this thin. So I'm going to take a pair of scissors and just cut my tip off a little bit. And I suggest, before you start painting, that you always test and see what size line you've got. Now that's going to be perfect. Begin painting again at the top of your garment. This is so that you don't smear any paint onto your garment with your elbow that's wet. Before I put my tip of the bottle to the fabric, I always shake it down. And I give it a squeeze or two to make sure that I have all of my paint into the tip of the bottle. Now that paint dried up a little bit in the tip of the bottle, and I needed to pierce it again with the paper clip. Okay, I'm ready to start painting dots. Now you'll see it's very easy to control the size and dimension of your dots. And as you paint, keep shaking because you don't want any splutters to ruin your garment. Just keep shaking the paint into the bottom or into the tip of the bottle. Okay, I'm not going to continue painting all of the line of dots. I'm going to move on to the purple dots here. And you can see, you can create the dots with the fine line writing tip or with the pierced tip. Here again, I'm shaking the paint into the tip of my bottle. Well, my paint has dried up again in my tip, so I'm going to pierce it with the paper clip. Now, you don't need to heat the paper clip again to do that. You just need to get the dried paint out of the way. Now, see, this is a very smooth, free and easy motion that I'm using there. Let me do my little purple dots again in the yellow triangles. If you wanted to deviate from the pattern a little bit, you could outline these triangles with a different color. You don't always have to stick to exactly what is shown in the pattern book. You can be creative and do basically whatever you would like to. Now, this is another really easy and fun stroke. You're just making little zigzags to create some dimension for the palm leaves. There is a pattern that you've traced on here to go by, but if you get outside of the lines, don't worry about it because this is a free form, free moving shape here. I think you're getting the hang of this. I'm not going to do the other tree. Now I'm going to do the yellow lines in the blue squares. And I'm using a tape tip on this yellow paint because I want the lines to be pretty thin. It's kind of hard to paint upside down. But you can see how easy it is to work with the tape tip. You want to make sure that the tip of the tape brushes the fabric. You want to make sure it's laying on top of the fabric to ensure good adhesion. Okay, I think you see how those yellow lines are applied. Now I'm going to do the pink dots in between them. Now all of the color combinations and directions are on the pattern, and they are on the back of the tape. So you don't have to worry about getting colors wrong. Okay, I'm making some little bright magenta dots here. Trying very carefully not to get my elbows into the paint. Now I'll do a purple zigzag. Again, shaking my paint into the tip. Now I think I want a little wider line for that zigzag in the yellow. So let me cut that again with the scissors and see how wide that's going to be. I think that's much better. Now if you make a mistake, like I just did, don't worry about it. You can fill it in, you can leave it. It just adds to the creative aspect of the shirt. Sometimes you can cover mistakes with rhinestones or ribbon bows, ribbon flowers, porcelain flowers. Don't feel like you've ruined a garment if you make a mistake. Always look for a way to try to cover that mistake. Now, I need a really wide line here for the pink line at the bottom. Okay. I'm going to move this pretty slowly because I want a good buildup of paint. I want a really thick, wide line. You can see how easy it is to follow the pattern and make a straight line. Now, the last thing I've got to do is the gold dots at the bottom that are just like the gold dots we've already done at the top. And I don't think I'll go all the way across. I think you've got an idea of how to do that. Now, of course, you will complete all of the steps for dimensional painting. When you finish the painting, you need to let the garment dry for 72 hours. The paint needs to cure for 72 hours before you wash it or launder it. Now, you've got a fun, exciting outfit to wear on vacation, to give as a gift, and you created it yourself. Wasn't that easy? We're ready to begin with project number 2. It's a patriotic shirt called Stars and Stripes that's from the Fashions on the Go book. The first thing that you want to do before you begin to transfer the pattern onto the garment is to pre-wash your garment twice. This is to remove all of the sizing from the shirt and just ensures good paint adhesion. I'm going to use the transfer paper again. I've taped it together so that I can transfer all of my pattern at once. There are 4 sheets of transfer paper in the package. Now you'll want to tape your pattern or your transfer paper down to the garment. I've taken the pattern out of the book and I'm going to trace from the pattern directly onto the garment. I'm not going to use tracing paper this time. Now you will want to measure the pattern to make sure that it's centered on the garment properly, and you will want to tape your pattern down to the garment also. We're going to use an ordinary ballpoint pen to trace and transfer the pattern onto the garment. Now you can see that I'm not staying exactly in the lines, and that's okay. You'll just be painting within the lines of the pattern that you trace. You don't need to use a lot of pressure, but you do want to lift up the pattern occasionally just to make sure that it is being properly transferred. When you use the ballpoint pen on top of the pattern like this, you can see exactly where you've traced, so there won't be any missed spots. Now I think you've got a good idea of how to transfer the pattern. Of course, you would continue to work up here and make sure that all of your pattern is traced onto your garment. Now we're ready to begin painting. Now that your pattern is completely transferred to the garment, we're ready to begin painting. We'll be using two paint colors, the Real Red and the Sapphire Gem. Go ahead and squeeze a good amount of paint onto the palette. Go ahead and squeeze both colors out onto your palette. Now I'm going to start painting with the Real Red. I suggest that you work from top to bottom, which is generally the top of your shirt to the bottom of your shirt. I'm going to begin with my top here, which is actually the bottom of the garment, just to make sure I don't get my sleeves in the paint and to make sure that I don't smear any wet paint. You don't need a separate brush to outline. If you want to get a good, crisp, sharp line, you can just turn the brush on edge to outline. Or you can hold the brush horizontally. And just be real careful. That gives you a nice sharp line. You need to load your brush with a lot of paint. That way you can get nice, even coverage. You can work that paint into the fabric. And as the paint begins to dry, if you see that you've missed a spot, you can go back and fill that in. This paint is really creamy in texture and it glides on really easily, and it covers well too with just one coat. And again, I really want to emphasize the importance of having a good set of brushes to paint with. Nothing ruins a design quicker than stray strands of paint that are outside of your pattern lines because of an old brush. Okay, we've almost got this finished here. I'm not going to complete all of the bow because I think you have a good idea of how to do that. Now I'm going to change brushes and use a smaller brush to come in and begin these stripes. I'm still using the red paint, but I'm using a much smaller brush, a number 2 shader, especially to get right down in here in this little corner. Little triangle here. Now if you happen to get out of lines, just a little, it doesn't matter because these areas will be outlined with dimensional paint. So don't worry if you make a little mistake here and there. You can always cover a mistake, like I said before, with dimensional paint or a rhinestone or some sort of creative design. Now once I finish this stripe, I'm going to go back and use my larger brush, since I'm not working with such small spaces and corners. Make sure you wipe your brush dry. And then we can come back in and do these larger stripes. Just hold your brush almost horizontal to the fabric to get a good crisp line. Let's paint one more stripe here, and then we'll move on to the next step. I just want to give you a good idea of how the garment is painted. Now the colors specified are indicated on the back of the tape, and where the colors are placed is indicated on the pattern in the book. Now, of course, you will want to go ahead and finish up the red stripes as you have finished the red bow. But I'm going to go ahead and start work on the blue section. Now I'm going to use my small number 2 shader again to get into those corners. Now, I don't want to load a lot of paint on the brush because I don't want too much bleed over. So just use your number 2 shader with a minimal amount of paint on the brush and paint very carefully down in these tight corners. And then once we get out of this corner, we can use a larger brush. This paint that I'm using, the sapphire blue, has a real shimmery quality to it that's really beautiful. Okay, I think that is enough with the number 2 shader. Now, if you feel more comfortable, you can go ahead and outline the entire blue section with the number 2 shader. I'm going to use a 3/4 inch brush to continue painting here. It covers a lot more area. You want to load your brush pretty heavily to get maximum coverage. You can see that you can get sharp lines with the edge of your brush. Okay, I'm going to come back down here, finish up the bottom half of the blue area. Just make sure you load your brush well. Put a lot of paint on that brush. Smooth it in. This paint goes on really easily and covers very well. I'm going to turn the shirt to the side just a little to give me a better angle to paint from. If you can, try to work on a surface that you can either move around or a surface large enough so that you can shift your shirt around. That makes it easier to have the best angle for painting. Go ahead and load the brush up well. Get this large area covered. Now if you have any ridges of paint like this, just work them into the fabric and then pull them into the center. You don't want to leave those. Just work them into the fabric and then pull them into the center along with the rest of the paint. You don't ever want to leave ridges of paint on your garment. There, we've just got a little bit here to finish up. Now I'm not going to paint the other blue area, but you'll want to finish that up. Now, when you've completed painting your garment with the soft paint, you need to leave it to dry for 24 hours. Then you'll want to heat set it according to the directions on the back of the paint bottle, and we'll be ready for our next step. Now that your paint is dry and you've heat set the garment, we're ready to do the dimensional painting. Now, with this particular project, there's one thing we need to do first before we actually begin the dimensional painting, and that's glue on the stars. Now, there's two ways that you can get the stars into position. If you need to, you can take the pattern out of the book and again transfer, with the transfer paper, the position of the stars. Or, if you want to, you can just refer to the pattern and just visually decide where the stars should go. And that's what I'm going to do. These are 1-inch applique stars that you can pick up at a craft store or a fabric store. Now, I've created a tape tip for my glue. I like the control that the tape tip gives me, and I want the glue just to go where I want it. So I've put a tape tip on my glue too. Just put a little bit of glue on the back of your star and press it into place. Make sure that you get all of the little points of the star covered. Put a little bead in the center. It's a good idea to have your stars laid out beforehand so you'll know where you want them to go and exactly how far apart to glue them. I'm putting these about 2 inches apart. Okay, now I'm just going to press these into place, and I will let these stars dry while I do the dimensional painting on the bow. I'm going to be using the Gold Glitter dimensional paint, and I'm going to use the tape tip on this paint. First thing I need to do is pierce the bottle tip with a paper clip. Be sure you hold the paper clip in a towel so that you don't burn yourself. There, I've got a nice size hole there. I'll be using the 3/4 inch cellophane tape, about 3.5 inches of it. Place the tape in the center of the tip and just roll the tape around, gently guiding it with your thumb and forefinger. And that creates a natural fine line tip. Now I'm going to see what size this is. This may be a little smaller than I want to use, and it is. You can see how very tiny you can get a dimensional line just by using this tip. But I want a little larger line. That looks about perfect. Now, remember that we're letting our stars dry. If you see that they're beginning to lift up, just go back in and press them down. Okay, let's start outlining with the dimensional paint. If you need to, rest your hand or your wrist on your garment. And always make sure that the tip of the bottle touches the garment. That makes sure that you will get maximum adhesion of the dimensional paint. Now, make sure as you paint that occasionally you stop and shake the paint down into the tip of the bottle. Don't want any air holes in there. And that's one of the great things about the design of this bottle, is that you can shake the paint directly from the bottom of the bottle into the tip of the bottle, and that's where you want the paint. Now you can see that even on top of these red painted areas, you can see the detail lines that you need to outline that were transferred onto the garment with the transfer paper. There's one more little line here. to paint, and then I'm going to outline the blue section. I'm filling in a little space here. It was a little sketchy. Now it's time to outline the blue area, this long line here. Makes it a lot easier to guide the tip of the bottle if you do place the tip right onto the fabric. Be sure that you use nice, steady, even pressure. Now, I think the stars are dry enough. They're pretty well in place. And I'm going to go ahead and outline the stars with the dimensional paint. Shake my paint down again. And I suggest that you just stop periodically in the midst of painting just to shake your paint down to make sure that you don't get air bubbles. Okay, you can see how the stars are outlined. I'm not going to outline the other two, but of course you'll want to do that, and you'll want to complete the rest of your bow too. I'm going to go ahead and outline here. See how fast and easy this is? I love the tape tip that's created with the cellophane tape. It's the easiest tip on the market to use. Now I'm outlining the stripes. You can just use nice, even, steady pressure. And if there's a place where your brush-on paint, your soft paint, has not covered, just go back in and fill in a little bit with the dimensional paint, and no one will ever know. Now, I think you've got a good idea of how to do that. I'm not going to complete the rest of the shirt with dimensional paint, but when you do, when you have finished painting with the dimensional paint and you've glued the other stars on and outlined them, you need to let the paint cure for 72 hours before you wash it. And then, once you've let that process take place, you've got a nice, colorful, fun, patriotic shirt to wear and enjoy, or to give as a gift. Now stay tuned, because we've got another project, a pair of shoes that coordinates with this shirt, that are fun to make too. Now that you've finished your Stars and Stripes shirt, I'm going to show you another little project that you can do using the same paint. It's a pair of shoes, slip-on white canvas shoes, with a Stars and Stripes motif. You need to get a pair of white canvas slip-ons from any department store or discount store. Now, a pattern is not provided for these shoes, but it's very simple just to draw the pattern onto the shoes with a pencil. What you want to do is imagine the center of your shoe. Don't actually mark the center, but just imagine it, and come over about 1 inch and mark a line. Now from the center, come over to the other side and mark about 3 to 3.5 inches and connect those two lines. Then what you'll want to do is draw another line about 1/2 inch from that line, from the first line that you drew, and then draw another one about 1/2 inch from that line. Now there's a little bow on the back of the shoe. If you're not comfortable putting it on the shoe right off the bat, you can draw and practice a little bow on a piece of paper, but you've got the basic design and basic shape of the bow on your shirt. So just draw a small bow on the back heel of the shoe. Now you're ready to begin painting. Cover with sapphire gem the toe of the shoe. Make sure you cover with a lot of paint, get good coverage, and then paint the stripe with real red. This stripe here is left white, it's not painted. Now at this point, when you've painted both pair of shoes with the sapphire gem and the real red stripe, you need to remember to paint the bow on the back of the shoe with real red. Now you need to let your shoes dry for 24 hours. And at that point, you will heat set the paint with the hair dryer. Now once your paint is dry and heat set, take your gold glitter dimensional paint, the same paint that you used on your shirt, and just outline the red stripe, outline the blue area, outline the gold star or the white star, and outline your red bow. Now you've got a fun accessory to wear with your Stars and Stripes shirt. And now that you've seen how simple and easy it is to create fun fashions for yourself and for your friends, I'm sure you'll want to do more.